with Kurt Busch, Austin Dillon, Casey Kane, and Ryan Newman exiting the first round of the NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series playoffs. We're here to preview round 2 with driver analysis, championship odds, predictions, and more. As Prime Sports NASCAR, brought to you by Race Review Online on PSN, starts now. All right, it is Tuesday, the 3rd of October, 2017. I'm your host, Greg DePalma, and we've got ourselves at least one round in the books for the first classification of playoffs in the NASCAR Cup Series. We'll take a look at the top storylines and much more with our top analysts here on the program. First, let's introduce CJ Radoon, RotoWire.com writer for NASCAR and F1, as well as a two-time Racing Writer of the Year award winner by the Fantasy Sports Writers Association. So, CJ, your first impressions of the 3 races and the first round?
Relatively expected, or as predicted, I should say. I think probably the biggest surprise was Ricky Stenhouse getting through. Everybody expected Martin Truex and Kyle Busch to kind of dominate, with Larson coming up pretty close there. I guess the other surprise would be Kurt Busch not making it through. But otherwise, everything's pretty much going according to plan.
All right. Also joining us is our special guest analyst and newest auto racing partner for Prime Sports Network. He's lead motorsports editor for RaceReviewOnline.com, Eric Smith. Eric, welcome to our network. Thanks for joining us. What's your take on the first round?
Thanks for having me. I'm honored to be joining this. I'd say I kind of agree with CJ there that it's pretty much what is expected. I think Kyle Larson, Martin Truex Jr., and Kyle Busch by far were the class of the field. And I would look forward to them as far as pretty well easily advancing as the rounds go on. They've garnered so many playoff points that it seems like it should be a shoo-in at least to make it to the next round. And really the only thing moving forward now is who are going to be the next 4 to get dropped, because I think those are 3 of the 8 easily that are going to make it to the next round.
Taking a look at the updated championship odds, and Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr. have been the favorites for a while now, both at 2-1. A little surprised, though, to see Kyle Larson slip down to 6-1, CJ. That's a pretty wide margin from the top 2 drivers when anything can happen over the final playoff races. And then you've got Harvick and Johnson and Keselowski at 12-1. Actually, Denny Hamlin is 10-1. Chase Elliott, Matt Kenseth are at 20-1, and then Blaney, McMurray, and Stenhouse at 100-1. So what sticks out for me is the fact that Larson is, maybe at this point in the season, 6-1 could be generous.
Yeah, 6-1 actually is looking pretty good for somebody that's almost, I wouldn't say a shoo-in, but highly likely to get all the way to Miami. Clearly, you got Truex and Busch that are looking almost certainly to go in. Kyle Larson probably would be the next closest along with that, and with the playoff points that they've accumulated, I think that definitely gets them through the next round. Anything can happen. We got Talladega coming up here, but those are your 3 most likely. And then when you get to Miami, it's a one-race deal. Whoever comes out on top is going to be the one to get it. So I think you'll see some strategy and some different things happen, maybe get some restarts, and Kyle Larson's been pretty good on those throughout the season so far. So I think that's a good bet right now to take it when you got the other 2 at 2-1.
Eric, now, when you take a look at the way that the formula is right now, of course, with the stage points, and so you have the drivers who have really dominated most of the season. Maybe they do deserve to have this much of a lead because of their bonus points as well. But is there a calculation at all that you've gone through when you take a look at how it works over the next 3 races, especially with Talladega coming up in a couple of weeks, that if either any of those drivers, even Truex, like let's just say Truex were to wreck in the first 50 laps of the race at Talladega and doesn't win Charlotte, is he in any danger of not advancing?
He could be, but I just feel with as much playoff points that he has at this moment, it'll be difficult for somebody that's below the cutoff line right now, who's probably 30, 40 points out, to really make that many points up in the span of 3 races. He would have to do pretty bad have some bad luck at Charlotte, and then of course Talladega. If he gets caught up in a big one, then yeah, I would say he may be sweating a little bit more than normal heading to Kansas. But just looking at the grid right now, he's almost a full race up on the actual cutoff line. So he would have to pretty much have 2 bad races, which puts a lot more pressure, I guess, to start out of the gates hot here at Charlotte coming up. But I don't really see a scenario to where he's really going to be sweating it too much going to Kansas.
Is there, when you take a look at, let's say, like somebody like McMurray or Kenseth, and maybe even Elliott, guys that are really down there, is there a cutoff for them as far as realistically who they could be able to pass without winning over the next 3 races, or do you give them a realistic chance of other than maybe like if you take a look at Elliott, Kenseth, and McMurray right now, do you look at Blaney, Stenhouse, and anybody else? Like, is there a possibility of Hamlin and Harvick as well, or maybe even Jimmy if they have good races, or what's the number of drivers that they have a realistic chance of passing without a win?
I would say pretty much those 5 drivers, 5 or 6 you mentioned there. I was looking at Blaney, actually. I'm glad you asked that. To me, I wrote about him this week about possibly being a sleeper for this round, but it's all going to be predicated on getting out of the gates hot at Charlotte, which he has a 26th place average finish there. But he's actually pretty good there. He just won in May in the Xfinity Series. That's a track that kind of suits him well. He's had some bad luck on the Cup side, so if he can start off hot there, going to Talladega, obviously anything can happen. But Fords have shown they're the clear power on restrictor plate tracks this year, with Stenhouse winning 2 of them and Kurt Busch and another Ford winning the 500. But people probably forget that Blaney finished second in the Daytona 500. So if he can get by those 2 races at Kansas, I took a look at that the other day. He has 3 top 7 finishes over his last 4 starts there. He actually started on the pole in May there too. He led 83 laps and finished 4th. So if Blaney can somehow get a really good finish this weekend and then escape through Talladega with just even a top 15, he's one to watch. That if his stats hold true at Kansas, he may be able to make this thing on point and not have to win, which to me would be a shock because I don't think many people have him advancing past this round of the playoffs. I don't think anybody really had him really in this round at all.
Okay.
So he'd be one I'd watch. Chase Elliott, they've shown a little bit more speed here recently. They've had 2 runner-ups in the last 3 races. I would look for him, though, to see how quickly he can bounce back because he was pretty dejected after Dover.
Well, he should be dejected because he choked. And that's a problem right now with Chase Elliott, and I think he even understood it in the post when he spoke after the race where, you could tell when a driver knows he choked, and that's been a problem for him recently. And look, because I don't know how many times I got to hear these drivers like when they're being asked questions about maybe you should try a different line or you should have tried maybe doing this. And immediately when they say, yeah, I guess I could, immediately when they say something like that, that was probably in their heads all along, and they just couldn't do it for whatever reason. That's the definition of choking.
Yep, I agree. And last year, he was pretty dejected, not quite on those lines as he was this past weekend, but when he finished, I think it was 4th at Michigan on Father's Day weekend last year, he led a lot of laps, and he had, I think I went and looked at 7 top 10s and 9 races. And he was pretty upset on that Father's Day weekend. And what he did after that, he had 5 finishes of 20th or worse over the next 8 races. So it's clearly in his head. And I'm wondering now if, just as dejected as he was, if this is in his head, and can he turn it around at Charlotte? Because if you start off bad, you don't want to be playing catch-up going to Talladega, which, if you remember right back in May, he was on his lid and he flipped on the backstretch. Recent memory, he may want to block a couple of those out, but he's just 21 years old, so is this something he can block out? Or, to me, I look at that as possibly being in the danger zone. If he doesn't get things turned around quickly in his head, he may be out before it even begins, really.
CJ, do you look at what happened to Elliott besides maybe finding a different part of the track to race? Do you think he should have also been a little bit more aggressive, defensive, with allowing Kyle to pass with such ease, or do you look at that as more of, well, but he probably can't do that because if he winds up wrecking, he may not even make it to the next round?
I agree with you on that because Kyle Busch, remember, was safely through to the other round, so he had nothing to lose. He could crash, he could do whatever he wanted to do at that point, and clearly he had the faster car at the time. I think what Elliott probably could have done differently, in addition to probably trying to change his line, but I think he could have been a little bit more aggressive getting up close to Newman. And I understand that the wash off of Newman's car and the lap cars slowed him down, and his handling wasn't right to be able to do it, or to get right up there. But I saw countless times throughout that race, you got close to somebody in the corner, they got loose, regardless of, who they were. And I think if he would have gotten pushed a little bit harder to get up on Newman's bumper, he would have been able to get him out of the way. And I think that probably would have given him enough space to be able to pull away just enough from Kyle Busch in order to get the win. But I agree. I think this guy takes failure a little bit too seriously. He's going to have to rebound very quickly if he wants to get over it and stay within the championship hunt. He's definitely one that I would be concerned about getting dropped from the cutoff after these next 3 races.
Are you okay with the way that the fact that in one round in the playoffs he's finished in the top 11 3 times with 2 runner-ups and he's 10th? CJ?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because if you look at the points, he's 14 away from Brad Keselowski. I would say Keselowski is probably the first one of those top guys that probably needs to be a little bit more careful going into these next 3 rounds. Can't really afford to have a bad race, whereas Truex and Busch can probably have 2 bad races. That puts them in the spot, whereas Keselowski could drop down. I think Elliott's fast enough to be able to get his way up there. But it's a system that we've got to play under now, and it is what it is. He's below the cutoff line now, but he's within striking distance of 4th, I guess, if you look at it that way.
Is there anything about the points, Eric? Because I know we've talked on this show for the last couple of years about maybe increasing the value of finishing first. And I don't know, maybe even a second, and having even more emphasis on points for the drivers that do finish up front. I understand what they're doing. It's all new, and I get it. It's just that, just the naked eye, you look and you see Elliott finishing runner-up in 2 out of 3 playoff races, and he barely squeaked into the next round. I mean, I don't know. It's just a little weird to me. That's all.
Yeah, I totally get that. It is a little weird that he can have his worst finish of 11th, and currently he sits really on the bubble pretty much. He's in that little group there. But I also like the fact that it does take into account for the whole season.
Mm-hmm.
Because looking at the stats, he really hasn't been real competitive all year. Yeah, he's finally turning it on, but I'm also wondering if some of these tracks maybe they're just better at, like at Dover, for example. Chevrolet led 283 laps this past weekend, and they led 280 laps at Dover back in June, but everywhere else they've just kind of struggled. Well, there's no more Dovers left. So now I'm looking, do they have enough speed on the mile and a half, which they haven't had really all year, and 2 of the 3 races in this round are mile and a half. So it almost kind of like the water always finds its level. Maybe this is just the water now going to find its level for Chase this round.
Okay.
But I also like the stage points kind of even that out with Stenhouse did kind of fluke into it there in Dover, but the stage points were so critical. If he doesn't get those stage points in the first stage at Dover, he's not advancing on, and it actually would be Newman instead. So to me, it kind of puts a little more emphasis on stage points now moving forward, because that's the smallest margin. And the 12 guys left, I look for them all to kind of qualify up front as far as at Charlotte and Kansas. And really that first stage is going to be critical. Is can they stay in the top 10 to get those points? Because you really don't want to be playing catch up or stage points or any of that at Talladega. So you want to gather as many points as you possibly can. So I kind of like that in the sense that it makes it at least these beginning of races where in the past, if you had all these playoff drivers qualify up front, they kind of ride around. They want to be there in the end. Now they're going to be racing hard because that playoff point between 5th and 6th could come down to they may not make the next round, and it may go back to, well, at Charlotte, Keselowski finished 5th in the first stage, and Harvick was 7th, and Keselowski beat him out by 2 points in the end. So it might make these guys race a little harder because now they're going to really be battling with each other. So I think it kind of all evens out in the end.
CJ, out of Kozlowski, Johnson, Harvick, and Hamlin, which driver do you feel the most confident advances to round three, and which driver do you think, if they were to slip out and have some issues, you would pick that guy?
Wow, that's a tough question because of that group. They've kind of been up and down. Kevin Harvick is one who always gets the job done. Jimmy Johnson's another one that comes on strong. Keselowski, it's kind of been up and down throughout the year, but we know Ford is a little bit behind. And then you got Denny Hamlin, who is really strong as the playoffs approach. So out of the bunch, you gotta give Dover to Johnson because he really punched above his weight there. But he also said coming out of there that it wasn't just a track that the team's really trying to, or really has figured out kind of what's been ailing them. You've seen Kevin Harvick though fade a little bit. So I think between Harvick and Keselowski, those two would be the ones that I would have my eye on in terms of slipping out. As far as anyone that I'm confident going through, I think probably Hamlin would be the best bet to be able to turn things around. He's sitting in seventh now, but he's relatively consistent. He's got the Toyota. He's got the Joe Gibbs power. Kyle Busch is his teammate. So of that bunch, despite the fact that he's the lowest ranked currently, I would expect him to probably be the safest to get through.
Yeah, Eric, you wrote yesterday about Kevin Harvick struggling a bit lately. What do you think the problem is, and something that he can correct right away, or do you think Harvick's in trouble?
I think he's in a little bit of trouble. I just think Ford's as a whole, Keselowski was, whether people agree with him or not, he was onto something. Toyotas definitely do have an advantage, and that's kind of the consensus in the garage. Like everybody's, yeah, they do, and whether it's fair or not, that's where the debate goes to. But he's right in the sense that Ford's, they're struggling, and I remember that was kind of under the wraps a little bit into the Brickyard here in Indy back in July. That a couple of crew chiefs I talked to did acknowledge that from the advantage that Ford thought they had at the beginning of the year, it's just pretty much gone. And I just don't know if he's got it, and to really kind of just take it by the grasp and maybe win a race this round, I don't think he's got it. So he might want to take the Brad Keselowski mentality, and Keselowski's been saying that he doesn't think he's got the speed to win either, but he knows he needs to be consistently in the top 10. So that's what Harvick kind of has to do, is just stay in the top 10. But right now, I don't know if he's got a top 10 car. If you remember at New Hampshire, he faded and he got caught up in that wreck with Austin Dillon, but he should have never been back there. He should have been in the top 10 as a playoff driver that's going to be a true contender. And at Dover, he was the loose wheel, and it just aches, and their cars aren't where they should be. And it's coming down to this round of 12. These are 12 very good drivers that I think he does need to be put on alert. But if you look at the intermediate tracks this year, Harvick's finished in the top 10 in all of them but one. So he's got that going for him where they can at least fall back on their mile-and-a-half program. His last 5 or 6 finishes are 4th, 3rd, 8th, 9th again, and 3rd on intermediate. So if he can do that, I would feel better about it, but he's kind of back in his lane to this round. I'm not real sure. I don't feel real comfortable with saying, yes, he's going to be in that top 8.
CJ, what do you? I mean, we've talked a lot about the scheduling situation with night racing and such, and you always seem to get those night races bunched up at times, like in the dead of the summer, and then also at the end of the regular season. But then we get to the postseason, and nothing is under the lights. We were supposed to get this race under the lights, and they even took that away from us, even though they are doing it because they believe it will provide better racing by doing it during the day. So I guess they better be right, because if the racing isn't right, then they just wasted an opportunity for a night race, which is what fans want. So tricky situation, but very surprised that they couldn't. Now Homestead, it's late in the year. It's as dark as you're going to get it, and they do kind of race into the dark there. But still, there's no like true night races in the playoffs. That's kind of strange.
It is very strange. In fact, this whole past week, I've been thinking that Charlotte was going to be Saturday night, and I had, I knew it was on Sunday, but then, every time I looked at it, it still surprised me that it's on Sunday afternoon. I would very much prefer a night race. I think the marquee races, the playoff races, certainly are the ones that you should put under the lights. Charlotte, without a doubt, is a marquee track on the schedule. Should be, a Saturday night race, prime time. Get the viewership up. At least it's on the regular NBC network, not on NBCSN. But yeah, I really miss the night races, especially during the playoffs. I think it adds that extra element of intensity, a little bit more focus. The cars look better. You see the sparks and everything. Just seems to bring out the emotion more.
All right, let's go ahead and take a look at some predictions now. So we'll start first of all with you, Eric, because you've got your predictions out at on your website at Race Review Online. So you've got Matt Kenseth winning at Charlotte this week. So, and he is a driver. You take a look at the standings, and things have been a little bit slow for Matt. He's second to the bottom, so that means you believe Matt Kenseth is going to advance. You also have Dale Earnhardt Jr. winning at Talladega, which would be pretty happy for everybody. See if he can get into win column. Probably his best chance to get a win before he retires officially as a full-time driver. And then Kyle winning at Kansas. But let's kind of start with this week and Kenseth. So that means you have Kenseth advancing. Who do you not have advancing in the second round?
Yeah, I've got Kenseth winning. It was hard because if I looked at the intermediate tracks, and Kenseth actually has not even led a lap this year on an intermediate track. But I feel like he's trending up. I know he wants to win badly. Toyota's got power. It's a mile and a half. I feel at this point Kyle Busch and Truex, they're going to be up front. Larson's going to be up front. But Kenseth is really good at that race. He's got 5 top 5s in his last 8 Charlotte races. He was 4th back in May, 2nd in this Charlotte race last year, which was run during the day too. So I just feel like that's kind of his time. As far as not advancing, I know I talked about Blaney earlier. I don't trust it yet. We'll see if his stats end up with, he starts off well at Charlotte and who's to say at Talladega. I just don't think he'll advance. I actually don't have Jimmy Johnson advancing. I just don't trust them yet. I last week said something. He said they found something, but I just don't trust it yet because with, again, 2 of the 3 races this round are intermediates, and he has 1 top 5 finish on an intermediate track all year long. That was at Texas. So, like last week, I wrote about, we'll see what Johnson has at Dover, and if he doesn't finish in the top 5, will tell us everything we need to know. Well, he did, so now I'll give him that pass. And Charlotte, he got 8 wins at. So we'll see what he's got this weekend. If he has something that might sway my mind a little bit, because he's really good at Kansas too. But I just don't see him right now advancing. I've got Stenhouse dropping out. Obviously, his only shot would be Talladega. I don't think they've got a good mile and a half program. He's talked about that. He knows that they're better on short tracks and super speedways. This round only has 1 super speedway, and it's hard to tell who's going to win that race. If he wins, then obviously advance on, but I don't think he's going to make it on points alone. And I think this is the end of the road for McMurray too. While this is his most competitive season as a whole, and yes, his best tracks are in this round, I just don't see the speed out of him where they can really point their way in just because of the lack of playoff points he's had throughout the season up into this point. So I look at those 4 to kind of drop out.
Okay.
Chase is my surprise to move along just because I think I'll see how mature he is. But I think that 8th and final spot could go almost a coin flip between Chase Elliott and Jimmy Johnson.
All right. And CJ, with Eric going with Johnson as his surprise out driver, do you have a surprise out driver, or are you going to go with just kind of chalk 4 drivers at the bottom of the list? How is your round 2 going to look like?
I would say that I would have McMurray, Elliott, Blaney, and Stenhouse all going out. So I think Stenhouse probably just a little bit too much to ask him to win his 3rd super speedway race in this season. Blaney, great on the restrictor plates. He could be a sleeper. I think Elliott, the confidence factor is the driver there for me, and I think McMurray is just missing the speed. If there were anyone that is on the cusp, though, I would put Elliott in to advance, and I would have Kevin Harvick out. He would be my surprise, and the reason why is I think he truly is, as we discussed earlier, I think he truly is in trouble, and I can see him as well as a team trying to reach or grasp at straws, make mistakes that end up costing him more than he would have liked, and that could cost him the ability to advance into the final 8.
All right, CJ, before I let you go, what do you got working on over at rotowire.com?
We will have our DraftKings preview up after qualifying for Charlotte, and then probably maybe a little bit longer than 24 hours after the race this week, we will have our NASCAR barometer following Charlotte up on rotowire.com as well.
Anything else going on besides NASCAR?
We got Formula One, Japanese Grand Prix this weekend, and the season is winding down to a close. Pretty exciting times there with Lewis Hamilton not finally getting a win. So Max Verstappen got the win last week in Malaysia. We got the Japanese Grand Prix this week as we work our way down to the end of that season too.
CJ, appreciate it. We'll talk to you in a few weeks when we say goodbye to round 2 drivers and preview round 3.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, CJ. All right, that's CJ Radoon. So, of course, CJ's been with us for a few years now, and he's done a great job. And he just keeps coming back. Can't get rid of him. Kenny Bruce, meanwhile, will be with us in a few weeks as well. Of course, Kenny with NASCAR.com helped us to preview the playoffs with CJ a few weeks ago. All right, Eric. So before I let you go, hold on after the show, but overall, your website looks like you got a lot of stuff that's available for race fans. It seems like you put out a few articles every day.
Yeah, you try to get at least 1 or 2 up there on the side every day. Just kind of keep drivers out there, keep stories out there. Just a lot of race previews. Obviously with NASCAR racing every week now to the end of the season. Just try to keep driver kind of profiles. How do drivers do at certain tracks? Trends, storylines, drivers to watch, kind of that thing, and try to spread it out as the week goes on, just to keep the previews and stuff coming along for the race weekend, so kind of people know what to watch, what to see, what to look for, kind of that type of thing.
And then also we can tease that you have an article out today on the NASCAR rules package, so people can check that out over at racereviewonline.com. So yeah, we're definitely looking forward to talking to you again in a few weeks, and of course throughout the rest of this season, and of course all of next season. So thanks a lot for checking in with us, and enjoy the racing, and we'll talk to you real soon.
Thanks for having me, and it's been a blast, and I appreciate the opportunity.
You got it. All right, so that's Eric Smith, and once again, you can check out Eric over at racereviewonline.com, where he is the lead motorsports editor, and it's not just NASCAR. Just like CJ, these guys know what's going on in motorsports, and we're glad to have him here on the Prime Sports Radio Network covering it all for us. So we'll be back in a few weeks to recap round 2 and preview round 3. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. And also a little bit later on Prime Sports Network, we have our tennis coverage at 6, followed by Washington Nationals baseball coverage, postseason coverage at 7 o'clock, actually at 7:15 with Nat Scrap. So that's coming up a little bit later on here on the Prime Sports Radio Network. For Eric Smith, for CJ Radoon, I'm Greg DePalma. We'll see you next time.